Welcome back. We are now 16 days into this war, and today I want to focus on something that happened in the last 48 hours that cuts through every piece of spin being offered by every side in this conflict. Two men, on two separate television programs, made two completely contradictory statements about whether peace talks are happening. And the gap between those two statements tells you almost everything you need to know about where this war is actually heading. President Donald Trump told NBC News on Saturday that Iran wants to make a deal. He said the terms are not good enough yet, but he framed Iran as the party seeking negotiations. Then, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi went on CBS's Face the Nation on Sunday and said the opposite. Araghchi stated that Iran has not asked for talks or a ceasefire, adding, "We don't see any reason why we should talk with Americans, because we were talking with them when they decided to attack us." And that was for the second time. ABC News 2 world leaders, two television programs, two directly contradictory accounts of whether diplomacy is even on the table. One of them is not telling the truth. That is not an opinion, that is a logical fact, and the cameras caught both of them. Let's fact-check Trump's position first, because it contains multiple claims that deserve individual scrutiny. Trump told NBC he is not yet ready to make a deal because the terms are not good enough. He said any agreement would require Iran to abandon its nuclear ambitions entirely. He also said he was surprised that Iran retaliated by attacking other Middle Eastern countries after the opening U.S.-Israeli strikes. Let me address that last point directly. Trump said he was surprised. That surprise, if genuine, represents a significant intelligence failure. Iran's strategy of striking Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, was not a secret. It was Iran's stated doctrine, publicly articulated for years, that any attack on Iranian soil would trigger responses across the entire region. The IRGC has publicly threatened Gulf states hosting American forces for over a decade. Being surprised by Iran doing exactly what Iran said it would do is either a failure of intelligence assessment or a rhetorical device. Either way, it deserves scrutiny. Now let's look at what is actually happening on the ground on day 16, because the military picture is moving fast. U.S. and Israeli forces continued their attacks on Iran, with missiles striking multiple sites across the central Isfahan province, killing at least 15 people, while Iran launched multiple barrages of missiles at Israel and claimed attacks on U.S. bases in Iraq and Kuwait. PBS. The Isfahan strike hit a factory while workers were inside, according to Iranian media. The U.S. and Israeli militaries did not immediately comment on that specific strike. That silence matters. When militaries decline to comment on a specific civilian death toll from a specific strike, it typically means the strike is under review, which is the same pattern we saw with the Manab school strike 2 weeks ago. Israel said it has now completed 400 waves of airstrikes on targets in western and central Iran since the war began 2 weeks ago, with Saturday alone seeing strikes on more than 200 targets including missile launchers, air defense systems, and weapons storage sites. TV Guide 400 waves of airstrikes. Process that number. That is an average of 25 strike waves per day for 16 days. And Iran is still launching multiple ballistic missile barrages at Israel every single day. If 400 waves of airstrikes have not stopped the missile launches, then the central premise of the air campaign, that enough strikes would degrade Iran's launch capability to an acceptable level, needs to be questioned publicly and directly. The Israeli military told CNN it is planning at least 3 more weeks of its campaign, with thousands of targets remaining. TV every day. 3 more weeks minimum. That means this conflict, which was described by Netanyahu on day 4 as quick and decisive, is now officially projected by the IDF itself to last at least 5 weeks in total, possibly longer. That is not a quick campaign. That is a sustained war of attrition. And wars of attrition have a very different cost structure than rapid, decisive operations. Now, I want to talk about the Strait of Hormuz because Trump's public statements about it this weekend contain a claim that needs immediate fact-checking. Trump wrote in a social media post that countries receiving oil through the Hormuz Strait must take care of that passage, and that the U.S. would help a lot and would coordinate with those countries so that everything goes quickly, smoothly, and well. CBS News. He named China, France, Japan, South Korea, and the United Kingdom specifically as countries he hopes will send warships. Here is what the evidence actually shows about whether any of those countries are prepared to do that. France is seeking to assemble a coalition to secure shipping through the Strait of Hormuz once the security situation stabilizes, while Britain is discussing options with allies to ensure the safety of maritime traffic. However, none of the countries mentioned by Trump has indicated it is ready to deploy naval forces while fighting continues. NBC News read that again carefully. Not a single one of the countries Trump publicly named as partners in his Hormuz coalition has confirmed they are sending warships. France and Britain are talking about doing something after the shooting stops. That is categorically different from what Trump described on social media. Iran's foreign minister reinforced this reality directly. Araghchi claimed in an interview that the strait is only closed to vessels from the U.S. and Israel TV Guide, a claim that is partially contradicted by the documented attacks on third-party commercial ships over the past 2 weeks, but which signals Iran's diplomatic framing of the closure as targeted rather than indiscriminate. That framing is designed to fracture the international coalition by suggesting that non-American, non-Israeli ships can pass safely if their governments stay neutral. Whether that assurance holds in practice is a different matter, but the diplomatic calculation behind it is sophisticated. Let's talk about Karg Island, because Trump's comments about it this weekend cross a line that deserves direct attention. Trump told NBC that the strikes had, in his words, totally demolished much of Iran's primary oil export hub. He then added, and I want to be precise here because the exact words matter, Trump said the U.S. may hit Karg Island a few more times just for fun. CBS News. Just for fun. The sitting president of the United States described the potential bombing of civilian industrial infrastructure in a country where over 2,400 civilians have already been killed as something he might do for fun. That statement will be replayed in every court, every international forum, and every diplomatic channel for years. It is also strategically incoherent. If Karg Island is already totally demolished, as Trump claimed, hitting it again for fun accomplishes nothing militarily while handing Iran a propaganda victory of enormous proportions. You cannot simultaneously claim a target is destroyed and threaten to destroy it further. Now let's look at what is happening to American allies across the Gulf, because this is the humanitarian and economic picture that is being systematically underreported. Saudi Arabia intercepted 6 ballistic missiles over Al-Kharj province late on March 14th, while Kuwait reported drone strikes that damaged radar systems at its international airport and forced a temporary closure of its airspace. CNBC Kuwait's international airport was temporarily closed. That is not an abstract strategic development. That is a civilian airport serving millions of passengers shut down because of Iranian drone strikes on a country that has not joined this war. The UAE's Al Dhafra Air Base was targeted by the IRGC, which said it launched 10 missiles and several drones against U.S. forces there, while black smoke rose over the port of Fujairah after debris from a drone interception fell near energy facilities, injuring a Jordanian citizen. CNBC. U.S. gas prices have spiked 23% since the war began, according to this Stound OEA. TV every day. 23% in 16 days. And Trump told NBC he thinks prices will go lower than they were before once the war ends. That prediction contradicts the assessment of virtually every energy economist currently analyzing the conflict. The structural damage to Gulf energy infrastructure, the insurance withdrawal from the strait, the rerouting of shipping, and the psychological premium that markets place on geopolitical risk do not simply evaporate when a ceasefire is declared. They take months, sometimes years, to fully unwind. The cultural and heritage damage inside Iran is also accelerating in ways that are creating serious international legal exposure. Iran said at least 56 of its museums, historic buildings, and cultural sites have been damaged by U.S.-Israeli strikes, with the country's Ministry of Cultural Heritage strongly condemning the attacks. TV, Everyday 56 cultural sites. UNESCO had provided coordinates of protected sites to all parties before the conflict began. The legal framework here is the 1954 Hague Convention for the protection of cultural property in the event of armed conflict. The United States is a signatory. Every strike on a verified cultural site is a potential war crimes exposure that American and Israeli lawyers are currently working to address in real time. Shrapnel from an Iranian ballistic missile damaged a building housing U.S. diplomats in Israel TV every day, according to Israel's Channel 12. The State Department was contacted for comment. That development, if confirmed, represents an unprecedented escalation. Iranian ballistic missiles directly damaging a facility housing American diplomatic personnel on Israeli soil. The potential legal and political consequences of that incident are still being assessed. And then there is this final detail that I think crystallizes the entire situation on day 16 better than any single statistic. Formula One and its governing body. The FIA announced early Sunday that the Bahrain and Saudi Arabia Grand Prix races will not take place in April due to safety concerns stemming from the Iran war. TV Everyday Formula One canceled. These are events planned years in advance, contracted with billions of dollars in sponsorship, broadcast to hundreds of millions of people globally. They do not get canceled lightly. When the world's most commercially calculated sporting organization looks at the Gulf in April 2026 and decides the safety risk is too high, the verdict tells you something that no press conference will say directly. Here's where we stand on day 16. Trump says Iran wants a deal. Iran's foreign minister says Iran has not asked for any deal. The coalition Trump named to reopen the Strait of Hormuz has not confirmed a single warship. 400 waves of airstrikes have not stopped Iran's daily missile launches at Israel. The IDF says 3 more weeks of strikes minimum with thousands of targets remaining. American gas prices are up 23%. 56 Iranian cultural sites have been damaged. A factory in Isfahan was struck while workers were inside, and the Formula One season in the Gulf is cancelled. None of that is spin. All of it is documented and verified. We will be back with more. Stay with us.